All
Yeah.
right,
When
so
it
let's talk about my guy,
talk
Kamani
about running
Vidal.
backs, time for running
Yes,
backs.
time for
You
running
couldn't
back.
wait for this one.
Yes, because there's been talk, which I think it was the Athletic that was reporting it, that he possibly wasn't going. I don't know who from the Athletic, possibly was a roster cut. And to me, I just think that's crazy. I don't think that's likely at all. And the reason being is he played extremely well. I don't want to say extremely, but played pretty well in this past preseason game, which Jarrett Patterson and Isaiah Spiller played in, and he was much better than both of them. Kamani Vidal coming out of college, when you look at missed tackles forced per attempt, which tackles forced per attempt is a very good efficiency metric that translates to the pro level typically. So when we're looking at missed tackles forced per attempt, right last year he was at 0.34, which is Jonathan Brooks best in the class 0.35. So very good at forcing missed tackles. You also look at the athleticism score for him. Very athletic in terms of a running back, which running backs, you look at the top running backs in the NFL, they're athletic. You don't want to be an unathletic in terms of NFL standards. It's kind of, I don't want to say a death sentence, but a near death sentence for running backs. So athletic. And he's also going to a situation where, yes, you can say Gus Edwards is the RB1, but like, let's be realistic. This is probably the worst, one of the worst running back rooms in the entirety of the NFL. So he's a rookie player. I firmly believe he's going to make the roster. I think he'll be the RB3 on this team. Then you have Gus Edwards in front of, or J.K. Dobbins ahead of him. No running back has came back year one after a torn Achilles and has produced. Never. It hasn't happened. So for me, I cross his name already off the list. I think that'll be a factor. I just don't think he's going to be very good. And then you have Gus Edwards, age 29, going to a brand new team. We don't see these guys who have not been quality starters in the past, or like stud running backs, all of a sudden have a breakout season. So for me personally, I think that there's a realistic chance with Kamani Vidal to be the guy. Now, does that actually happen? Probably not. I think that there's a good chance you don't even know who the running back one for the Chargers probably isn't even on the team right now. There could probably be somebody being cut and then they pick him up and that guy could potentially be the RB1. So I just like the potential with Kamani Vidal that it's a wide open room. And yes, I know people like Gus Edwards, and I think he's okay. I think Gus Edwards is a very beatable player that if Vidal is actually good, he has the potential to beat him out.
I don't see it, man. I don't see it. I think
You
Gus
don't see it
Edwards,
yet.
J.K. Dobbins,
It will.
well, both of them were brought in. They know the system. They know Greg Roman's offense. So
Yeah.
both of those guys, and Gus Edwards, maybe he's 29 years old, but he did come off a 13 touchdown season. And we've seen guys like Raheem Mostert find themselves in favorable offenses with old offensive coordinators. So I hear your stance on Vidal. He's just a little too far down on the depth chart for me to try to draft. I would like to see him a little bit higher up. I got a feeling he's going to be on waivers in the first couple weeks. That's just my opinion on it, though. When it comes to running backs that I'm looking for in the late rounds, one name that really stands out to me, another guy that was really good in college, Blake Corum, who had a 27 touchdowns senior season. This guy's backing up Kyren Williams right now, and we know Kyren Williams was electric. He was an all-pro last year, missed a couple games, and still finished with 1,200 yards. So he had a phenomenal season. But to me, what this indicates with them drafting Blake Corum in the third round is that they're acknowledging that Kyren Williams is a little injury prone. Came into the season hurt last year, got hurt in the middle of the season, has a smaller frame. They went and got one of the bigger frame, bulkier backs in the draft. So this is a guy I think they will use in the red zone. Will have opportunities immediately. But then also, if anything happens to Kyren Williams, if anything, he goes out for 4 games, gets a high ankle sprain, whatever. I'm not wishing no injury on him. Yeah. But just for the sake of conversation, if anything happens, Blake Corum will step into one of the most favorable running back situations you can have in the league with Sean McVay. And once he gains the trust of Sean McVay, it's over. And there's been nothing but offseason hype about his work ethic, how he's been using the passing game, and then also just how he's been on the field in this training camp. So Blake Corum, late in your drafts, could be one of those players that potentially flashes like top 12 upside late in the year, or the minute he gets a starting role, could be a game changer for your lineups. I like taking risk on a guy like that.
I think there's 2 guys like that. I think it's Blake Corum and Jalen Wright personally, that they're truly an injury away from being high-end fantasy producers. Like if something happens to Kyren, Blake Corum truly can be a top 5 running back in fantasy.
Braylon Allen too. Braylon Allen's up there too.
Maybe. I don't know if he's as good as those other guys. But let's go with running backs I'm not drafting. And for me personally, I get the name, and I think sometimes in fantasy football, people are attached to the name just because they've been, relevant in the past. And I understand with Ezekiel Elliott that there's really nobody else there. But my problem with Zeke is that Zeke is cooked. Like, you look at every underlying efficiency metric for years now, it's been declining, like sharp declining, downhill declining. And last year it was bottom of the league, like RB 70 out of 70 running backs, 72 running backs bad. So the efficiency is gone with him. Now, I do think that there's a chance that he could just see volume, because who else is truly going to see that in that offense? But if there's anybody that can show signs of life, I think that they'll easily take the work away from Ezekiel Elliott, because I just don't think he has anything left in the tank at this point in his career. He's shown that this team has already caught him, has brought him back. The wheels are off at this point. So what you're just hoping for is that literally nobody else is there. And this is another team where I saw something on X the other day that Khalil Herbert is potentially auditioning right now for other teams, that this team is looking to potentially either make a move to trade him or potentially cut him. So if that's a guy who's in play, I think he would step in day one for Dallas and be the RB1 there. I even think if he were to step in day one for the Los Angeles Chargers, I think he would compete and eventually overtake Gus Edwards. So that's a guy who I should have talked a little bit about, but just
Yeah.
a guy, a late round kind of guy, maybe a dart throughout the end of leagues, that if he is potentially cut, he'll get scooped up. And I think it could be by Dallas. But for me, I'm just not interested in Zeke. I just think everything has fallen off for him.
Yeah, you're definitely hoping he gets the touchdown role that he had in the past, and doesn't have to
Yeah.
be efficient. Like, efficient, it doesn't always equate fantasy points, but it
He just
does
needs
lead
to
to
do the
like
work.
possible replacements. You know what I'm
Yes,
saying? So
absolutely.
you got to be concerned about it in that way. So I agree with you there. A player that, and this is kind of more of a thought process than it is even a player, but the player that I'm fading late in drafts is Tyler Algier. Now, there's been the offseason reports. Tyler Algier is going to have a big role. When you look at those words a little bit deeper and you actually look at the context, he was talking about over the season and that the team would need him. Not
Yeah.
saying that he's going to have a 50-50 split with Bijan, or that he's going to take on the starting gig, which I've seen some people believe in, which is crazy to me. Bijan Robinson is the guy. So when you draft Tyler Algier, do you start him at your flex spot? No, because he's not a starter on his own team. That's a tough player to start, because you're so reliant on him getting a touchdown. Now, on your bench, say he's there. What are you hoping for? There's only one thing. He's not carving out this huge role. You're hoping for a Bijan Robinson injury. That's literally the only reason why. And if you draft him as a handcuff, you're betting against yourself. You're saying the only reason I have him on my roster on my bench is in case my main guy gets hurt. And that's not the way to play football. That's playing to play fantasy football. That's playing scared. To me, I think this about him, and then a lot of those other mediocre options at running back that are there as handcuffs. You can do much better than that upside wise and capitalize, like you talked about. Say a Kamani Vidal does happen to take the starting role. I'd much rather have that option than a guy who we know is locked in behind an entrenched starter and we're preying on an injury. He has no room for an additional role. Same thing when it comes to a guy that I'm talking about, Blake Corum, as a rookie. He has a path to immediate workload. They're going to get him some reps. I prefer those kind of players as opposed to like, I need Bijan to get hurt, and then I got an RB1. Yeah. Leave those guys on waivers, man. Fill your bench with startable pieces for yourself.
No, I like that. And even if he does take over the role, I mean, he'll be solid, and he can be a guy who can be an RB2 for you, but it's not like he's going to be, Blake Corum-esque. I think that'll be okay.
We've seen Algier in that role, and he's been like a back-end RB2, high-end RB3 at best. We know what that looks like already.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%.